Alrighty, we're here with Walter Hood, who is, as I was just telling him, the first genius I've ever really known. And so, full disclosure, Walter and I used to be neighbors when I had a studio in Oakland, right there on the Emeryville border. It was my pleasure to be his neighbor. And I gotta say, when we first got to know each other in the 90s, as much as climate and planet stewardship was part of the conversation, it has become, so important in the last 25 years. I'm wondering if you feel that and how it impacts your work.
Well, I mean, it's interesting you say that, the 90s, was a time that I think, particularly out here in California, culture was the kind of the big C word, multiculturalism, and it was Rodney King, OJ, it was this big kind of cultural moments. But, you started out talking about Earth Day. And so that's back in the 70s. And so in a way, the way we think about ecology and environment from a landscape architecture perspective, that's always been kind of part of our thinking. So it never dropped off the scale for us. But I think for popular culture, and particularly for Americans, we tend to only be able to focus on one thing at a time, unfortunately. But I do think, we have to get stronger at understanding this dialectic between, the environment that's out there and the things we make and how we want to live, and that they're tied together. And so we can't kind of look at these kind of cultural, racial issues without thinking about the ecological issues. Environmental designers, we've always thought about this since the late 60s, early 70s. But again, we're very good at only sound bites at a time. And I think we got to get out of the soundbite mentality.
Absolutely. It reminds me, too, that this is one of those discussions that when people come to it from a certain perspective that is entrenched, do you find yourself having to explain how your work fits in, how it allows for, how it considers environment and climate change, and just things that are contentious in some places?
Well, a lot of our, early work, we're in kind of marginal, poor, brown and black neighborhoods. And so there's no convincing there that we need to do, because people are living in those environments, right? Where there is a freeway 2 blocks away. I can actually hear it. I can't see the particle matter that's basically going into my lungs, but that's there. In areas where we have the leisure time to think about it, that's where it gets complicated. And that's where people are, I find, more deniers, because they have the resources to not feel like they're being impacted by a lot of these ideas, whether it's, sea level rise, flooding, whether it's, economic issues that deal with like food deserts and things like that. If you live in the hills behind me, flooding is probably not a big thing for you. The sewage treatment plant is not a big thing for you, all of those things. And so it's really trying to get, resources that go into places that the most vulnerable to actually put these ecological issues up higher, and that they can just be as high as housing. So we can think about housing as well as we can think about ecology, but we end up going housing, and we don't think about ecology. And so it's a kind of a weird, place that we're in a lot of the times, because it's almost like we're just putting out fires. We're not thinking ahead and trying to be preventative in a lot of these places where we need to be.
Well, a couple of folks that we're having on this very broadcast are talking about environmental justice in particular, which is another concept that is hard for lots of people to wrap their heads around. I mean, it requires a conversation, and we have that conversation. And then if we're lucky, there's head nodding and go, oh, I get it now. I am so delighted we took this time, because I'm going to be talking to people now and in the future about how we all are part of this planet and need to be better stewards, and we all have to think about things kind of the way you are. So
well, I'm glad you're doing well, and thanks for reaching out, man. And we should do this more often. And would love to have you come over as well and teach us how to do podcasts.
All right. I will look forward to it. Walter, take care of yourself, and we'll talk soon.